everybody for joining. We can get going. So I appreciate it. The chat is open, the Q&A is open, and we are going to have a nice time here getting to know Beehive. So let me share my screen. All right, everybody should see a slide deck here. This is the Beehive product deep dive. I'm going to talk through every current feature, what is on the roadmap, what is part of the vision for Beehive, so you can get a very transparent view into what we're doing and what we're building and why. So we'll go through all the different modules we have and what's on the roadmap. I hope you find it all very cool. I got the Q&A open, the chat is open. Feel free to ask questions throughout. You can do it anonymously, you can do it as yourselves. Have no fear. We are all nice people. All right, so here's what our agenda looks like today. I'll quickly introduce myself, and then we're going to go through product, roadmap, and vision for these 4 different modules that we have for physical risks, for transition risks, I should update this, and opportunities, um, governance, and the report. These are also our 4 modules inside of Beehive. And I want to show you what we got going on that will launch next year, sort of a big release for ourselves. So hopefully that'll all be interesting. But quick introduction into who we are. So my name is Adriel. This is my LinkedIn chat. I'm the founder and CEO of Beehive. Beehive is an enterprise climate risk management software company that helps our customers prepare for and respond to natural disasters and comply with regulations like SB 261. For those who don't know, SB 261 is a California law that requires a climate-related financial risk report to be published by January 1st, 2026. That is in 69 days, 10 hours, 56 minutes, and 10, 9, 8, 7, 6 seconds from now. And BI helps you all do it in an hour. And we're going to get into some of that stuff. What's the output that you need for this California law is this thing called the TCFD report. There's an example of a customer of ours, Asana. It's a public report. All these reports have similar structures. They have 4 sections and 11 sub-questions. The sections are governance, strategy, risk management, and metrics and targets. And in order to get one of these reports, you really need to do 3 things. You need to assess physical risk exposure. So what is your exposure to natural disasters today and in the future? You need to do a transition risk assessment. So what risks or opportunities exist to your business in an economy impacted by climate change? And you need to actually hands-on keyboard write this report. And traditionally, the way you would do this is hire a consultant, anyone from the big 4, PwC, Deloitte, EY, all have services here, to more like consulting slash software companies like S&P Global or IBM have products here, or Moody's, or maybe a more boutique consultant. And usually it would take 12 to 16 weeks to do, can cost between $100,000 and $300,000, depending on the size of your business and the complexity. And you sort of get a static version of all this stuff. And as we will get into, what Beehive does is helps you do all of this in an hour and give you kind of useful software where you can make real risk management decisions from. So let's get into it. So first, we're going to talk about physical risk. We're probably going to spend most of our time here because I think it's honestly the most interesting. And we have a lot to say about this. So what is the problem that we are solving? So physical risk assessments aren't data driven and they're limited in scope. And here's what I mean. Limited in scope means that traditionally, if you're working with a consultant or even some softwares, you cannot assess risk to your entire operation. So if you are a software company and you have just 5 offices around the world, and then you have another 5 data centers, maybe some cloud, maybe 1 co-located, and you have 3,000 employees located all over the world. Traditionally, what a consultant would do is take your headquarters and maybe take your 1 data center and run some assessments on that. Or maybe they would take all your offices and a couple of data centers and 2 zip codes where you have a lot of employees, but they wouldn't go further than that. And that is because traditionally the model is to charge per asset or per location, because traditionally it is very time consuming and very expensive to run a risk assessment for any particular location. If you're doing it manually, you got to kind of bring together solutions from a bunch of different places and do a lot of research into what is wildfire risk in 30 years at this particular zip code. How does that change under different scenarios? How do I understand this information? And doing that multiple times is super time consuming and therefore super expensive. And then the second problem is that they're not data driven. And this isn't true for all of them. There's certainly plenty that are, but I've heard many stories, including from companies who use very large established consultants, where I'll give you one specific example. I heard a story back when I was researching the industry for this business 2 years ago or so, um, where a large publicly traded company that many of you probably interact with used one of the big four consultants for climate risk. And so I said, oh, wow, that must have been amazing. Like, tell me about that, because that's an experience we probably want to recreate and compete against. What they told me was kind of shocking to me. But the way that Big Four consultant did their physical risk assessment is they created a survey and they sent the survey to the office managers of this corporation and said, hey, office manager in LA, or office manager in Chicago, or office manager in Berlin, what would you say is hurricane risk or heat wave risk or flood risk to your office? And what do you think, dear office manager in Berlin? Does that look like in 10 years or in 30 years? And how do you think that changes if climate change is really bad or not so bad? And his office manager was like, I don't know. Like, I just moved to LA last year. I used to live in Portland and I got a job here. I think LA's had a wildfire before, so I guess bad. And like, I think I don't remember us having a bad heat wave, so probably not so bad. And that's literally how the physical risk assessment was done. And that is insane. Insane. Because how can you, as a publicly traded company reporting on risk, say the way we assess risk is we fingered to the air, said, I don't know, let's ask Teresa in LA what she thinks flood risk is? Like, that's crazy. But that is sort of what the market was providing at the time. And certainly other companies do a much better job, but also that is not the standard, maybe, but like what a standard offering was that many people came to expect. So that's the problem that we're solving here. So now let's talk about what Beehive does. We try to give you an auditable assessment in seconds across your entire business. So here's what I mean by that. What you're able to do inside of Beehive is you're able to upload your entire business, anything with an address. And you can upload any type of asset. So you can put in your facilities, like your offices, your factories, your warehouses, your data centers, your supply chain. So do you have warehouses that are part of your supply chain, factories that are part of your supply chain, key suppliers you want to input in here? Um, Earlier today, actually, we were kicking off with a company that does some storage stuff, we'll say, and they have an asset type called a vault. So we created an asset type called vault, and you're able to do that. And what's really cool in here, you're able to put in, again, we don't charge per asset. So there's no additional cost. So companies actually get really broad. So they put in their entire employee base, not any personal information, but they put in like the zip code and how many employees live in that zip code. And so on average, our customers have about 3,000 assets in the software. And 3,000 assets normally at a different company that charges $100 per asset would be a $300,000 engagement. I don't think it's going to work for most companies. Even if you charge $10 an asset, no one's going to pay $30,000 for that. But we don't charge per asset, so you get unlimited assets in here. And then this is brand new. We created a new tab called Customers. So what's cool here is that, especially if you're a bank and you want to put in your loan information, so how many outstanding loans do you have? Or if you serve SMBs, a really cool use case here is a company that serves, let's say you're this is not a customer, but just a generic example. Let's say you're Toast, that restaurant kind of payment software you probably use when you pay in a restaurant, and they serve tens of thousands of small restaurants. They want to understand where all their customers are by revenue and say, hey, if a hurricane hit New Orleans and we have 200 restaurants in New Orleans who use us and process $1 million a day, and our restaurants there were closed for a month as they recover from the hurricane, what would be the impact of that on us? How much money would we lose? That is a very specific use case, and you're only able to do that in a tool like Beehive that doesn't charge per asset. So you input all these assets. That's where we solve that like limited in scope problem. And then you're able to get an audit trail for all of this. And what I mean by audit trail is if you pick any location here, you're able to say, oh, so this one, flood risk, we call 7 out of 7. But why is it 7 out of 7? Like, why are you telling me it's high risk? You need some information here. It needs to be auditable. People need to trust it. Like, if you're an investor relations person or a legal person or an SEC reporting manager, you can't just put out information because somebody said it's high risk. You need to know where it came from. So what you're able to do in this audit trail is we give as much information as we can as to why we think this is a 7 out of 7 risk, or why cyclone risk here is a 5 out of 7 risk. And let's see, did I pick one that changes over time? Let's see if we go to 30 years. SSP thought you see heat wave went up. So we'll explain why heat wave went up. So look across 30 years, SSP5, heat wave is a 4 out of 7, which means we expect 8 days per year with a temperature above 96 degrees and 2 heat waves a year. We drop this back down. You see all that number changes. So on SSP1, we expect fewer heat waves. So we try to be as transparent as possible. So you have some sort of audit trail to hold on to say, like, this is information that I trust. This isn't Teresa in LA who just moved there telling you, yeah, I think I remember that wildfire last year. Probably it's a problem. This is something much more real. So that solves that problem. Now, what's also really important to our customers is not just the assessment, not just like the results. That, all right, cool, here's a table. And you could say, oh, show me just my offices that have high risk from flooding. All right, here they are. Or you can export this as a CSV. That's cool. It's useful. But there's like workflows that our customers have around communicating this to people. So, for example, yesterday I had a call with this very large media software company. They make video games, and they were telling me that they use this other tool for climate risk assessments. When they basically got this table, so similar looking table that they can filter. Now that's great, but no executive is going to look at a table. Like imagine showing your CFO a table with 576 rows. They don't have time to look through this and filter through this and create their own charts. They need something very different. And then on an operator, might not want to look at a table because this just information is not useful enough. They need something more visual, something that they can really think about. So let's talk about how those two things work. So first, the operator. The operator, who needs a little more context, is able to look at all their assets on the context of risk maps. So click of a button, you can see wildfire risks in North America, or you can see cyclone risks in Asia, or you can ask the question, how does this change in 30 years for Australia? What about if climate change is really bad? It's called SSP5, or not so bad, SSP1, whatever. You can see all this stuff visually. So maybe going back to North America, you might want to be talking to the HR leader, and you're presenting to your head of HR, and you want to make a point that you have employees in high risk areas. You can filter to just see the employees that have high exposure to cyclones, or maybe high and medium exposure to cyclones, and say, look, if we're going to solve the problem for anybody, let's solve the problem for Florida employees, because this is where their exposure is high and it changes quite a bit under the worst climate scenarios. Now, that is information that your head of data centers or head of IT does not care about. Your head of data centers does not deal with employee safety. They care about data centers. So great, let's show them what they care about. Let's select all of our data centers and say, show me the ones that high impact from heat waves, because heat waves is what really matters to a data center operator. Cyclones, they probably have good defense against, but if there's a heat wave, cooling costs go way up, that could cause a brownout or a blackout, huge problem. Great. Like, don't show me all my data centers on a map because this is not particularly helpful. Show me the ones that have high risk from the thing I care most about, which is data centers. And so you're able to do that stuff really visually. So that's really cool for an operator or a planner, like somebody who's planning for real estate expansion, things like that. Now, the executive, going back to the CFO or a chief HR officer or whatever, doesn't want to see a map. This is way too detailed. This is not interesting information. They don't want to click in here and understand the audit trail for all of these things. This is just not that helpful. They need to see a summary. And so your traditional approach might be to pull, and you could still do this. You could export everything into a spreadsheet, build your own charts, whatever. That takes a bunch of time. It's all embedded right in here. So what our customers are doing here is, let's say they're preparing for a presentation to their board because they want to tell their board about climate risk oversight. Their board just needs the high level. They want to answer the question, what percentage of our total assets have high risk exposure in the short term? There you go. Click the button, change it. Maybe their board is actually doing some more long-term planning. So they want this chart and they want to say, how do my assets look like who's got the higher risk. And it looks like drought right now is not a huge risk, but over time increases to be one of the biggest risks in the company. So maybe you want to look into that as some more long-term planning. Or you can even see heat waves now as the second highest risk, grows quite a bit over time, whereas flooding stays a little more stable. Maybe you want to present something to your head of HR. So your head of HR wants to see just the employees that have high risk from any disaster type. And how does that look by state or by country? So you can say, hey, if I'm going to focus my attention anywhere, it should be on New York. And now I'm just curious, what if I really want to focus on cyclones? Looks like it's mostly Florida. What about heat waves? Looks like it's mostly Texas. What about drought? Lucky California. So you're able to ask and answer these questions really, really rapidly without doing all this in a spreadsheet, even though you certainly can. And on top of this, AI is embedded right in the software. So what you're able to do is ask questions, just like you're getting used to doing in ChatGPT, uh, of your data. And so if something is not embedded directly in one of these charts, if something is kind of not findable in the map, if you have a question about something, you're able to ask questions here, and the AI, whenever it wants to participate with me here, will present you with this answer. There we go. Gave me this answer. So it kind of gave you this answer here, and you can ask follow-up questions that are more specific. And so some cool ways that you can use this software, and this AI is really cool because we're trying to give it more and more information. So right now it just pulls stuff from your data. Soon we're going to feed into it actually our documentation. So a lot of people ask for this, so I'll show this right now. But we try to be as transparent as possible at how we build these models. People can debate it. People do. They tell us we're wrong all the time. That's okay. We try to be transparent here. We'll try to get better every day. We are going to feed the AI how we build our models. We're going to feed it all the papers we pull from, all the data sets we pull from. So you can ask bigger and bigger questions here of like, how do you understand risk, or how do you understand heat waves, or why is hurricane risk high here, medium here, or how does this change over time? We're going to try to feed it more data and make it smarter. So it'll almost be like you have the world's best trained consultant in your pocket who has read every scientific paper, can explain to you in plain English, and most importantly, has memorized your data. And that is a really difficult thing to do. And so that'll be super helpful. When I say memorize your data, don't get scared from a security perspective. We have all the fancy SOC 2 Type 2 compliance, annual pen tests, all the security stuff that you would want here. So people like to ask me, like, oh, why can't I just ask ChatGPT what my risk is in a location? I'm like, go right ahead. See how your IT team feels about you dropping in sensitive addresses into ChatGPT and asking what your risk score is and having it get trained. They're not going to love it. And you probably won't trust the data because who knows where it's getting its information. What we try to do is be very, very transparent about where we're getting our information and why we think a risk is what it is. And then we go through a ton of scrutiny with IT departments so that they're comfortable getting the data here. All right. So that is on the physical risk stuff. So we're going to talk about quantification. Yes, we'll talk about quantification here in a second. Again, so reminder, ask any questions that you want in Q&A or in the chat. The other thing that's relatively new, we launched about a month ago, and that works okay right now, to be honest. We're spending a lot of time on it over the next couple months, is quantifying risk. So tradition like this is great. This tells me I have 173 assets at high risk. This tells me that 10%, 10.2% of my assets, or 14.9% of my offices are at high risk from floods or drought or whatever. Cool. But what it doesn't answer the question is like, so what? Okay, 14% of my offices are at risk from floods. Okay, how bad is that? How much money might I lose if something goes wrong? And so we want to be able to quantify in dollar terms those potential risks so that everybody can have a discussion, not on hypothetical hazards or scenarios in 30 years. I was talking to a customer yesterday who's like a retailer and was asking her about how some presentation stuff went. Because honestly, when I brought up SSP 530 a year, my operator's eyes glazed over. You probably all had this example, maybe even when you talk about like carbon emissions, you're talking about, oh yeah, our scope 3 category 4 emissions are 374.037 metric tons, and that is a 1% decrease over last year. And in 2050, we're projecting that to go like, like, what does that even mean? This is a little more understandable. Everyone knows what a flood is, but I want to understand, why should I care? Like, is this going to be a problem for my business? And the way we do impact calculations is the following. So what you're able to see off a baseline is a dollar value at risk. And let me explain how we get to this number, what you, the customer, or if you're working with a consultant, are able to do inside of Beehive to adjust this number. And let me explain it. So you're able to get a dollar value here. Say my total dollars at risk is $39 million. Mostly that comes from employees. Mostly that comes from the United States. And heat wave is my biggest exposure. And you can see some other things. So what does it mean to have risk from flood? It means $10 million of risk. But you know what? Even though I don't have this memorized, let me see how this looks here. Even though I'm saying, there you go, actually cool. So even though 79 assets have flood risk, but only 64 have heat wave risk, actually in dollar terms, heat wave risk would cost me $17 million and floods cost me 10. Okay, now we have something to talk about. Like, if anything, you should be more concerned about heat waves than about floods. Why is that? My guess is that data centers take up a huge amount of that money. So we probably set up, and I'll show you this in a second, custom equations to say, if a heat wave impacts a data center and a data center goes down for an hour, I could lose $1 million. It's a lot of money. But if a flood impacts an employee and if something bad happens, maybe they lose 2 or 3 days of work, and an employee losing 3 days of work to get their house fixed cost me $3,000. So the order of you might have 1,000 employees impacted by high flood risk and 3 data centers impacted by high heat wave risk. Those 3 data centers could cost me a lot of money if something goes wrong. So that's the context for this. And again, you're able to see things in similar formats. And here's my US risk, here's my Indian risk, whatever. Filtered through this in a bunch of ways. Great. Now, two things that are really important here, kind of philosophically for Beehive. The first is that we want to be super, super transparent with how you see these risks, with how these risks are calculated, these impacts are calculated. Meaning you can export everything as a CSV. And so if you export it, you'll be able to get a big spreadsheet that shows you how every risk is calculated so that your finance team who doesn't want to go into the software, or who needs super transparency on spreadsheets, is able to see all that. And the second thing around how this actually gets calculated is that we want to build the calculator, but allow you to push the buttons. And here's what I mean by that. We're just a software. We don't know exactly how you define risk, but you're able to, in here, create what's called a custom equation. And a custom equation is the definition of how it is you define risk. So let's go through this process. Let's start with like offices. Just go ahead and have that up here. So I create an equation called office. It's for the asset called office. You make one per asset. And then you set up, what do I want this equation to be? So for here, the way we calculate loss potential for an office is the cost per closure day times the closure days per year. Now, maybe I want to do different things. Maybe I want to add an insurance value. Maybe I want to add lost revenue per closure day, which would be great for a retail location. Maybe I want to add a repair cost per asset, right? If I have a warehouse and it's hit by a flood, not only is it closed, and not only do I have lost revenue because I can't ship goods out, but I have to go fix the warehouse. So you're able to create these custom equations. And when you do that, you get full control over this. So again, this is how you define it. And then when you create that equation, if we go to our office here, you adjust all the parameters. So maybe you say offices are essential to us, like they are how our business functions. If an office is closed, we lose $100,000 a day for every day it's closed. Or maybe you say, you know what? We love our offices. Important to have collaboration across our employees. But if an office is closed, everyone can work from home. We lose $1,000 a day, something nominal. Totally fine. We don't want to be prescriptive. We'll give you some templates. We can give you advice. But like, this is up to your business to say, what does it really mean for an office to be closed, or a retailer to be closed, or a franchise location to be closed, or whatever. The other thing you're able to do is say, what is the impact of different disasters and different levels of disasters on my business? Maybe you say for offices, wildfires are a huge problem. We're definitely closing the office if there's a wildfire. High risk of a wildfire, closed for 6 days, medium risk closed for 3 days. Like I think wildfire is a huge problem. But heat waves, like who cares about heat waves? I got air conditioning. If anything, come to the office if there's a heat wave. We have really good air conditioning. We're not worried at all. Maybe we have a backup generator. Great, do that. Or maybe you say, you know what, hurricanes. Oh man, or there were hurricanes. I'm like terrified of hurricanes. I think we close for a week if there's a hurricane. But I'm not worried at all about wildfires because whatever, I have good safety programs. Great, you adjust that. So whatever you want to do there, I got a little bug. We hate that. Live demos, what are you gonna do? So whatever you adjust that to will change. Actually, it did change correctly. I don't know where that bug came from. But it changes, and then all the numbers in the actual impact calculator could adjust directionally. So that's how we do those equations. And I see there's some issues there, right? So like there's a little bug, and I think some of the numbers didn't quite change. We're working a lot on this over the next month. It just got released. We're spending a lot of time here. Another thing that we're working on here, this is very much part of the roadmap. There's two things that are important. The first is that right now, if you create an equation for a factory, this is going to be across all your factories. Every factory, this is how you calculate risk. But that's not exactly correct, because you could have two factories in the same city. One is a mega factory that produces $100 million of goods a year, and one is a tiny factory that has $1 million of goods. It would be crazy to think they have the same cost per closure day or repair cost per asset. That doesn't make sense. And so you could put in an average, like a standard cost per closure day would be $50 million. But what you should be able to do is specifically tag that high value factory as cost per closure day is whatever, 10 million, and the low value factory is only a million, and then the equation will come up that way. So that's one thing that needs to come in here, and will maybe by the end of the year, maybe early next year. The other thing that you want to be able to do is include things like insurance or mitigating factors, insurance especially, because if you have a terrible disaster and your warehouse floods and you have $5 million in damages, hopefully you have good insurance, and hopefully insurance pays you out for that $5 million in damages. So you still have business continuity disruption. You still couldn't get goods out the door. So you still should have a risk factor in here to say, if a warehouse floods, I lose $100,000 a day because I can't get goods to my customers. But the repair cost per asset might be mitigated by the availability of insurance. And so we want to be able to integrate that kind of stuff. And you're not able to do that inside of Beehive yet, but those are the kinds of things we're thinking about. All right, quantification usually is tricky enough. People have strong enough opinions here that a question or two pops up. So feel free to chime in and tell me why I'm wrong here, or why I'm not wrong. Either one's good for me. Because when we leave this step, we're going to talk about, I'll mention drought for a second. I'll talk about project seasons. All right, maybe no questions. Feel free to chime in if you have. Um, so that's custom equations. That's how that works. We're spending a lot of time trying to get that right over the next month or so. Um, the other thing that's new, I should have shown this when I was on the map, but we just launched drought risk. So I think we launched this like a week or two ago. Right now it's in, I think, North America and Europe, maybe in Asia, but you're able to see drought. There's North America, there's Europe. Yep, there we go. I think Asia has it. There we go. And I think South America does not. Yeah, South America does not yet. This will be live in maybe a week or so. So drought is new as well. And this is really important for data centers. So great. That is what is new. And we're launching right now. We cover the whole world except for Africa and Russia. Uh, Certainly Africa, maybe Russia will be launched by the end of the year, or so. Okay, let's talk about project seasons. This is the first time we're really talking about it super publicly, and it's a big bet for next year. So here's what's happening. I see a competitor on here. I hope you enjoy. So here's what's going to happen. Everything we've done so far is an assessment. We have said, in theory, wildfire risk is high. We have said, hypothetically, where's my mouse? There we go. We have said, hypothetically, here's a risk map of wildfires in South America. Hypothetically, here's what it looks like in 10 years. In theory, you might lose $39 million if all these things happen, all hypothetically. But what is missing from here is something short term and something that is a little bit less hypothetical, something that is really focused on short term planning and short term resilience. Because floods and heat waves and cyclones, excuse me, are not hypothetical things. They're things that happen. The crazy stat is that I wonder if I have this doc saved. No, I should pull it up. Um, the crazy stat is that every year in America, there are approximately 28 natural disasters that cost over $1 billion each, which means every other week, every 12, 13 days, there's a devastating natural disaster in the United States. And that is just the United States. If you bring in the whole world, probably every 2 or 3 days, there's a devastating natural disaster. And for our customers have an average revenue of about $1 billion. Probably 60% of them are global businesses. The other 40 or so percent are US only. But even if you're US only and you have operations all over the United States, you'll see how different parts of the country, wildfires, bigger deal in the West. Hurricanes, bigger deal in the South and the Southeast. Flooding happens actually a lot through this Mississippi Delta here. Heat waves happens a lot through Texas. If you are even national business, let alone international business, you are affected by natural disaster every few days. And no one can keep that in their head. I live in New York. I barely know what the weather is in my backyard. How am I supposed to know what my data center over here is going to suffer through, or what my 1,000 employees over here are going to deal with, or what my supplier's warehouse over here might be dealing with on a given day? Impossible. Just not even a relevant thing. But it is genuinely impactful and financially material for business when a natural disaster happens. And so, what we want to be doing is to help our customers understand the following question, or find an answer to the following question. In a particular period of time, what natural disasters are probable to happen? And if they did, which of my assets would be impacted? And how much money might I lose? And this is what one of our early designs looks like to answer that question. And like I said, this is early. Right now, this is blank. Let's refresh. Oh, there we go. This is early. We are like beginning to build out the real design that we will build here. Oh, that's the wrong one. 1 second. Let's go to this one. We're beginning to build out what this would look like sort of over the course of the next month. And our goal is to launch a version of it by February 1st. So what you'll be able to do in here is say for a defined period of time, for next quarter, for this month, from March through June, what disasters are likely to happen based on historical events? And if they happened, how much money might I lose? So, for example, you might say for next quarter, how many people do I have at risk? Which assets do I have at risk? How much money might I lose? And from which types of disasters? Looks like hurricanes throughout the Southeast. Looks like wildfires throughout California happen in this particular period of time. Now let's understand that better. Why do we think hurricanes in Southeast US or the Caribbean islands or Australia might happen? Well, if we look at historical events for this particular period of time, here's specific examples of hurricanes that happen in that period of time. Here's the geographies that they hit. Here's your assets or the regions that would be impacted by it. And the way we get to this $5 million estimated impact on your business thing is all the stuff that I just showed you in custom equations. So you've already set up that hypothetically a hurricane would have this type of impact, that it would close your warehouse for 3 days. And for every day that the warehouse is closed, you lose $20,000 or whatever. An employee would take a day off if they're in a high risk wildfire impact, you have 1,000 employees, and every day off costs $1,000. Like that is how we get to this number. So you'll be able to do is really do some specific and time-bound planning to say, all right, enterprise risk management team, I want to talk about hurricanes for this period of time because I think we have $5 million at risk from hurricanes. We have this many employees there, we have these assets there, they're in these geographies. Specifically, I want to talk about hurricanes if we're going to do anything Southeast US, um, and not the Caribbean islands because we have less money at risk. So, like, let's prioritize what is financially material before we move on to the other ones. Specifically, I want to talk about, you know, my Charleston data center because that is the highest dollar value at risk. And I want to assign a Johnny from HR to talk about the Miami office complex. So there's where most of my people live. Do we have good plans to respond to a hurricane? Do we know what we're going to do if a hurricane hits? Do we know what our data center uptime plan is if a hurricane hits? And if you bring hypothetical information like this to somebody and say, hey, look, like hypothetical, we got a data center, an employee, whatever, in a high risk area, somebody's like, oh, okay, cool, all right. I mean, thank you, but seems hypothetical. But if you say, hey, look, last year this hurricane hit this area, or 15 years ago, this hurricane hit this area. If it hit again, here's what would happen. I'm not saying you're guaranteed to have a devastating hurricane in this area. Obviously, impossible. But I am saying, do we have good plans and systems to respond to a hurricane in areas where we know hurricanes have happened before and they may be happening in the future? And what's really cool about this, and what I try to emphasize a lot, is our approach does not require anybody to say anything about climate change because some people want it, some people don't. You don't need to say they're getting worse or becoming more frequent or global warming. You could, and if you're a company that thinks that is true, which I recommend thinking, you should. But if you're in a company where you're dealing with people who don't want to talk about climate change, great. Don't talk about climate change. We're not talking about climate change. We're talking about taking historical data and saying, are we prepared for this to happen again? Because here's it is proof that it happened to us before. And maybe it happened before Teresa moved to LA. Maybe it happened in a geography Teresa's never lived in. Maybe it happened before Teresa joined the company, so she never thought about this issue. So you're able to do this really specifically. So this is a huge bet that we're taking is being able to help our customers answer the question for a particular period of time, what disasters are likely to happen, and if they happened, which of our assets would be impacted and how much money might we lose. And so we're beginning to turn these raw designs into real designs over the course of the next month. So I think I'm doing another one of these in December or something. And so you'll see some of those real designs, maybe mid-November. Uh, and then we're hoping to launch it by February 1st. As a part of this, we'll get into mitigation plans. So, like, all right, what is our actual plan to respond to a hurricane? Do we feel prepared? Does Mike know his job? Does Jennifer know her job? Do we have the right checklist set up so you can run some simulation, do some good risk management here? That'll come later, but this is a big bet of ours. Okay, wow, 241. I spent a lot of time on physical risk. Let's keep going. I'm happy to answer questions that are coming in. All right. Looks like I'm doing a very good job explaining here. All right, let's talk about transition risks and opportunities. So the problem is that traditionally, the way you do a transition risk and opportunity assessment is a consultant kind of interviews a bunch of your executives, asks questions, tries to understand the business pretty well, um, and then comes back with here's some risks or opportunities that might be relevant. Takes a lot of time, just hours of the company's day to set up all those interviews, and usually spans weeks or months scheduling the interviews, doing market research, understanding the business, whatever. What we try to do is replicate that experience as much as possible using AI. And so here's what's really cool. What you're able to do inside of Beehive is give the AI some context. So give it your ESG report, give it your 10K, give it your industry, give it your core peers and competitors, give it specific information like we have a net zero target by 2050, whatever. Give it whatever you want and teach it about your business. Upload a conversation that you had with your CFO about risk management, whatever. Give it whatever you want. And then the AI says, I'm going to act as a consultant. and I'm going to understand your business really deeply. I'm going to do market research. I'm going to understand the rules of the TCFD. I'm going to understand what your peers have disclosed. And I'm going to suggest risks and opportunities that might be relevant to your business. But for each one, I'm going to give you my reasoning. I'm going to be very transparent about why this is a risk that could potentially impact your business. And I will share with you peers of yours that have disclosed something similar. So you can say, great, we're not alone here. We are disclosing or thinking about things that our peers and competitors are also disclosing. So this isn't better or worse than a consultant. This is just that process using AI condensed very, very quickly. And again, our goal here is not to say the AI is a super powerful demigod who gets everything right. It's not. It's going to get some things wrong. So the way this experience works for the customer is the AI does this thing, and then we get on a call their customer and we say, hey, AI is our junior consultant, smart 24-year-old kid, got its MBA straight out of college, no real work experience. Here's what I came up with. Let's talk about it. Here's one. Do you think this applies to you or not? Here's some competitors who said something similar. What do you think? No. Customer says, I don't think this one applies. Okay, great, no problem. What about this one? Yeah, this one makes perfect sense. Totally applies. Got it. Other companies have said something similar? Amazing. Yes, definitely going to accept it. Cool. So you have control over like what the results are here. The AI just brings you information really, really quickly in an organized fashion. And then we click a button and the AI drafts suggested disclosure language so that you can basically have your disclose really quickly. So that's what the product looks like today. A lot of that is new. We launched that maybe 6 weeks ago or so. What's on the roadmap there is better benchmarking. So it'd be cool if you could have an AI in here that says like, how does this compare to what my peer said? So you're sort of able to get that question at a time. So you can say, what did my peers who said this? And maybe you want to say, what did Ford disclose that I did not disclose? And you want to ask more open-ended questions like that. We want to be able to help you answer that in an AI-powered way instead of saying, okay, cool, Ford disclosed this, but not this. What about here? Okay, Ford did not disclose this, but did anyone else? Like you got to go one by one here. I think it should be more automated across the whole thing. So that's transition risk. We won't touch on that stuff at the moment for the interest of time. Okay, I'm going to skip governance for a second. Well, no, I won't. Let's do governance really quickly. So governance is really important. Governance is basically about how does your board oversee climate-related financial risks and opportunities, and how does management oversee this? They're actually the first two questions of the TCFD framework. So if you go back to Asano's report, you will see first question, describe board's oversight of climate risks, and then second question, describe management's role in overseeing climate risks. Super, super important. Is literally the first question that you need to talk about. And so setting this stuff up for the first time is complicated, can be time consuming. That's what we're able to do in the product is set up your governance structure. You're able to say who's on your board, who's on your ESG steering committee. If you don't have an ESG steering committee, we help you set it up and we advise you on who should be on there. We give you content to talk about and we tell you how often, or you tell us, but we can give some advice. How often does your audit committee or your non-gov committee or your ESG steering committee meet to review these things? And all that stuff is set up in the software with some of our guidance. Now, what's cool and new is that we now create this deck for you. Oh, wrong button. That's more of a pitch deck. We now create this deck for you that you're able to take and present to your board. So basically what we do right now, it's done manually by kind of customer success, but soon it'll be in the software, is, hey, you got to present to your board because you want to have good governance and you said your board reviews this on a semi-annual basis or whatever. Here's a template that talks about what specifically you've done that brings in the findings from your risk and talks about the transition risks and opportunities that you explored. So we started creating this and customers have really, really loved it because they have this step that they need to take even for SB 261 compliance around have my board reviewed this stuff. And it's not hard to do. You just takes a couple of hours to create this deck, and we solve the problem for you. Give you this template. Customers take this, slap their logo and their design on there. They copy paste a lot of the content, and it just saves them a few hours of work. So customers have really, really liked that. Lastly, we'll talk about the report. Never gone this long without questions. I'm either boring everybody or I'm getting better at this. Man, probably boring everybody. But thanks for sticking around. I see you there. All right. So let's talk about the report. So it just takes time to do. This is not rocket science. If we go back to, I keep erasing. There we go. If we go back to Osama's report, anybody can do this. Anybody with some knowledge of the risk assessments and the rules of the TCFD and who's kind of read the context here, you find the framework, you find what competitors have done, you write it up. The problem is it takes a while. Like, honestly, to get it, a first draft could take 5 hours if you know what you're doing, 10 to 15 or 20 if you really don't. It just takes time to write and gather that information and remember what it is. Probably more than 5 hours, even if you know what you're doing. Because you look at Asana, and this is not the most sophisticated to kind of middle of the road report. And it is one, two, three, four, five, six pages, 5.5 pages. It's a little long, right? Like it just takes some context to write. And so you need some technical expertise. You need to know what you're doing here. What Beehive does is it takes your whole risk assessment process here, everything you do inside of Beehive, all the documents you uploaded, everything we learned about you, and AI drafts that initial report for you. And so what's cool here is not that, again, AI, demigod, genius, thought of everything. Perfect. Draft it, move on. AI wrote my report for me. I actually posted on LinkedIn a little while ago. I was like, here's what we do. AI can draft a report. It's crazy to pay a consultant, 80 grand to draft this if you can use AI for this. And somebody responded, and I was a little cheeky. I said something like, charging a client 80 grand to draft a report for them is malpractice. Somebody responded to me and said, using AI to do this is malpractice. I was like, oh, well, I get your point. Like, I'm not trying to make the point that you should use AI to click the buttons and spit this out and tell your investors stuff that AI said without any review. Not the point, not what I'm advocating for. The point is that getting that first draft to review is not like something you should be using your minimum hours for and your specialized skills for. What you should use that for is AI takes this first draft. I'm going to discard this because I have so many versions here. AI takes that first draft, and then you use your expertise, your knowledge of the business, your knowledge of legal, your knowledge of the company, your knowledge of like your ESG practice, and you make some edits. And you say, here's what I want to change. And then legal comes in and says, actually, I'm going to change a little more. And then maybe your consultant gives you some advice of here's what you actually want to change. And you get to that final version, all of which is tracked inside of BI. They're all AI in this one because it's only me and AI who uses the demo here. But like it would track every individual who made any changes here. And you're able to get to that good version. But AI just takes that first draft and turns that 20 hours of work for you or month of waiting for a consultant to get around to writing the report and does that really quickly. And then what you're able to do in here is actually compare your answers to your peers. So benchmark. So you're able to say, you know what? I compare myself against Braze or against General Motors or against HubSpot or whatever so much. I want to understand how did HubSpot answer this question and how did that compare? Restore this version here. And how does that compare to my answer? Oh, wow, they wrote this. Okay, like I really like that. I'm gonna stick that into my framework. I'm gonna make some adjustments, whatever. So you're able to do all that work directly in here, which just allows you to get this initial report out really, really quickly. So I think it's a really cool targeted use of AI with a lot of training and human oversight. All right, I got a question here from Jeffrey. For SB 261, companies must make comply or explain statements and state which standard or framework each company is disclosing against. Can your reporting software adjust for TCFD 2017 or 2021? Great question. So to kind of show you what Jeff was talking about here, CARB, California Air Resources Board, who's in charge of this particular law, issued this checklist a little while ago. And they say each report needs to contain a statement on which reporting framework is being applied and use that reporting framework as a framework, using that reporting framework as a reference point, what recommendations have been compiled and which have not. So we have this tab in here called CARB statement. And what the AI does is learns which disclosure you use, answer that, and then does the same thing for what's missing and what's not. So it reviews everything you publish and says what's missing and what's not. I actually don't even remember in this demo account what I have published, so we'll see what it comes up with. Yeah, it looks like I think there's certain questions I just didn't answer. So like I didn't include scope three emissions, and I have I didn't put in climate related metrics in my answers here. Which let's see, is that correct? Yeah, there you go. So I didn't answer question nine, and I think I mentioned scope one and two somewhere, but not scope three, whatever. So it reads that and it answers this. And again, like this is a draft, it was probably okay, but you're able to edit it. So yeah, it does answer those questions. And Jeffrey specifically asked TCFD 2017 or 2021. We usually recommend citing 2017 for two reasons. One is that is specifically the one mentioned by Carb, so just like straightforward. Two is such technicality, and maybe it doesn't really matter. But TCW 2017 was the actual just like guidance. TCW 2021 was sort of what do they call it, like an annex or something, like an update. Was it new guidance? Was it just an update? I don't know. They were kind of similar. TCD 2021 did have more asks around quantifying risk, and I don't think anyone in the United States wants to quantify risk at the moment publicly. So it's just not a necessary thing to expose yourself. You can just do the TCFD 2017, and it's a little safer. But good question. And so Jeffrey made the point. There's 46 points we assessed for compliance in 2017. 2021 has about 80 points. Yeah, I think right now for California specifically, no one's trying to be a hero here. No one's trying to assess against 80 different points. And yeah, IFRS is 115. So like the whole industry will continue to evolve, will continue to get better. Um, no one's trying to be a star in the US right now. But next year evolving into IFRS, I think we can skip 2021 for the most part, but evolving into IFRS S2 will be really essential. I think we even wrote that as part of our roadmap is by next year to sort of have IFRS S2 frameworks. Okay, that is it for me. That was the deep dive. I'm happy to sit here for a minute or two, see if any questions come in about anything that we talked about. As you can tell, very transparent and happy to answer anything. The link provided by CARB to the UK reference document is the incorrect one. Oh wow. So you're saying CARB messed up? What a surprise. What a surprise. Silly CARB. Silly CARB. Glad you enjoyed, Jeffrey. Thank you for the questions. All right. If there are no further questions, I just want to share some upcoming events that we got going on. So we're at a conference next week. So I guess this is 2 weeks. Let me put this in the Zoom here. In 2 weeks, we are hosting an event called How Climate Models Work. My co-founder, Ed Knudsen, who built our climate models, is going to be describing how we build the physical risk models. Then November 13th, I was invited to speak at Columbia University a couple weeks ago, and folks seem to enjoy that. So I'm just going to redo that talk for anyone who joins. And then November 20th, I'm interviewing my friend Sophia Gluck, who leads sustainability at Okta. She's amazing and very, very smart. And so you should definitely join that and learn from her. And then our very, very last event of the year is going to be on December 4th, um, which is going to be another one of these product demos, but 6 or whatever weeks from now. So that will be that. So I hope you guys are able to join any of those events that sound fun for you. All right, folks, I appreciate it. Thank you very much. Enjoy the rest of your Thursday, and I hope to see you in 2 weeks. Bye all.